Hi.
Hi, how are you? Hey, well,
Okay. I see that we've been chatting in Substack.
oh, yes, we have a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still putting stuff in Substack, although I'm putting more stuff.
I should be catching up this week as well.
Yeah, I'm putting more stuff in. Hey, how are you doing?
Oh.
Um, yeah, I'm actually putting more stuff in my personal blog now, but I'm
Yeah, I
still
noticed that too.
And
I'm
we
s-
benefit from it.
Um, one of
An
the
open
things that
web.
I found this week was a relatively older site
Mhm.
um, pointed to
Oops.
their blog, which wasn't on their main public side website, turned out to be a Medium page,
Oh,
although it didn't come up as the address. And then everything else that page did seems to have vanished except for the Wayfaring machine.
mm,
Most disappointing. Somebody clearly somewhere hasn't decided to keep up with it
stay up
in one form
to date.
or
Yeah,
another.
yeah. It's I'm just
Have
right.
you been buying? Have you been buying more bookcase length, or is
That
was
one
it?
That one was
Yeah,
always, yeah, that one was always there. I think I did get that after I set up the first three. Yeah,
just
I went back to
it's just
IKEA.
the viewing angle must be different.
Yeah, yeah, I went back to IKEA and got one additional one. Yeah. Um, I forget. It's the cheapest thing. Although I have to give them credit. The shelves are staying pretty straight, which I have had other more expensive shelf units that have not. I also have been finding things have disappeared from links that I had saved in an old archive. Now that I'm sort of going back to my peppermint related data and all of my archives. I did a talk for this Michigan
Yeah,
the Three Oaks
I saw
Three Oaks
your
Area Museum.
peppermint.
Yeah. And that got me kind of excited about the topic. And I realized that, I had always sort of in the back of my mind thought, well, there were a lot of things that I wasn't able to say when I wrote the dissertation because I was, writing a dissertation. And it hadn't occurred to me that the same kind of went for the book, right? The book was really an academic monograph, and so there were a lot of things that I kind of edited out, and especially a lot of narrative elements that were sort of additional parts of the stories of these really interesting people that I found that I wasn't really able to tell. So I'm thinking if I do this especially if I do it online in a very non-linear way where people aren't obligated to read through every single page and will get less annoyed if I go out on tangents. They'll follow me on the ones that interest them, and they'll ignore the ones that don't. I think that gives me a little bit more license, and I'm not
Yeah,
trying to, I'm not only trying to sort of make my mark on the historiography of rural American business, or what does rural America even mean. But what I'm doing, so I'm looking at a bunch of those archives, and I'm finding that a lot of those links, even to documents I thought would be permanent, like Google Books, are no longer live. And furthermore, I'm using this was my first external
well,
my very
personal
yeah,
personal sites versus Google Books,
yeah.
I would have thought would have been different. But I'm surprised that if anything disappears off Google Books.
Well, it may just have been it may have been relisted with a new URL, and they may still exist. But now a lot of them, I had just sort of copied the URL without saying what it was into these long lists, and now I don't know what they are. I know generally, kind of what list they were on, but not necessarily what, I can't search on that document again. But then I also, the other issue that I'm having is this little device. This was my very first external backup of this variety.
Yeah, in this particular case, I got like 6 404s on a trot, which was going a bit even for me.
Yeah. And so this thing only works some of the time now. And so I thought it had been, I thought the issue had been that I was using this little device to turn the USB into the USB-C, and it wasn't pulling enough power. It's even got its own little USB cable that that kind of retracts and everything. So it was from LaCie, which which probably doesn't exist anymore. But I think it was a tiny little Seagate drive. It was only about.
No, they do change. I mean, it was like I was looking for not necessarily filling mine up, but the smallest one I've got is getting close to full. And I sort of had a quick look at what the price of for about $100, give or take.
Right.
How big a one can I get? And it's like, I think it was like 8 terabytes or something stupid.
Yeah.
And it's like, the one I'm thinking of retiring is like a half a terabyte.
Right.
And it's like, it's only like 30 years ago when I bought my first personal PC.
Yeah.
And I went down a chip size to go up a hard drive size. So that meant I bought a 110 megabyte hard drive.
Right.
Whereas the one that I was using at work was only 10.
Yeah.
And there was some conversation going on somewhere where they were talking about an older piece of technology, which I think was a dial-up telephone.
Yeah.
But it might not have been.
Yeah.
It might have been something else. And it's like those words are going to just disappear.
Right. 56K modem. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even like a standard old style Kermit handshake.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm transferring it. I'm trying to transfer it. And it had gotten through a lot. It had gotten through about 50 gigs, and then it crapped out on me. Even right to my left here, the second screen that I use is actually an old iMac. So it does have some actual old-fashioned USB ports in the back of it still. And I was connecting it directly. And even then, it sort of crapped out on me after 50 gigabytes. So it's going to be a kind of a teeth pulling.
This was also the meme that came up a couple of months ago. That was along the lines of there are only 2 genders, right? At which point some older IT guy put up a meme picture of like 50 odd different sets of connections that we used to have.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, you children have no idea.
Yeah. Right.
And then some biologist who was a fungus person come up and said, there's 2, there's 4, and when you get down to the level of fungus, there's a couple of thousand plus.
Really? That's interesting.
Apparently. I haven't been out to check it. I haven't bothered looking.
I wonder what
nobody's come up with an obvious,
they're different functions.
That's not right, or whatever, whenever I've seen it. So I'm letting it stand for the moment.
All right.
But
so I got an email from Thomas. He's not feeling well. He's got a sinus thing going on. So I don't know if he mentioned that in the. I haven't been in the Obsidian vault today.
Yeah, he mentioned it.
Okay, cool. And the other thing that I did was I've been emailing back and forth with Mark Bernstein at at Eastgate because I am I'm upgrading to the new version of Tinderbox so that I can look at all my old data in a slightly better than the kind of read-only format that I was getting when I didn't send him the money. But I figured, I want to keep supporting Mark as well because I think he does cool stuff. So, but anyway, I've also been in my Tinderbox this morning from 10, God, 15, almost 15 years ago, some of it. So it's been a walk. It's been a walk down.
Any sparks there
Yeah. There's a
in
lot
your
of
tinderbox?
yes. There's been a lot of those sparks that I think will catch fire in this new. And ultimately, ironically, it's going to be an Obsidian vault where I kind of do my nonlinear. I'm calling it Peppermint Kings annotated for the time being. I don't know if it'll ever become a print thing because I'm not sure how I'll navigate the different things, but maybe it will at some point. But in any case, we have a section to read today. A lot of horrendous stuff in here. He seems to have kind of decided to lean into the horrendous goriness of all of this, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, this is where Bobby Kennedy Jr. got his inspiration for the real Anthony Fauci, telling these tales about experimenting on people who are less important than those of us who are blessed to have been born in the lower 48. So yeah, that was a lot.
Well, it's what's amazing too is the total lack of reportage on any of it. Like you hear about the Tuskegee Airmen because they
Mhm.
were in the contiguous, although I don't know if he ever makes that claim specifically. I think he does say in the Alaskan internment issue cases, like there was such a blackout, nobody even knew what was happening,
Yeah.
much less, any sort of fallout after the fact.
Hmm.
But it's like, all these stories that you just have never heard and don't know,
Yeah.
I think that's what makes the atrocity even worse is
Hmm.
that not only did it happen to begin with, but that, we don't hear about these things.
I mean, specifically about the Tuskegee Airmen, do you think maybe, and I don't know this one way, this is just a question. Um, do we know when that story came to light? I mean, that didn't, I'm sure that didn't come to light during World War II or even in the immediate aftermath, at least I guess.
I
But
think
Yeah.
what's that? Did that come to light sort of during the 60s and sort of so there was a specific context for that to come to light,
Mhm.
and get publicized, and
Yeah.
and by
Well,
that time, right? By the time that things like these were coming to light, I mean, the Philippines. Well, we'd already disposed of them. We'd given them their stuff and their independence. And
which I had never realized how much that sort of followed upon the fact that the Japanese had kind of made them semi-autonomous. So there was really
And
no
that
going
was the
back at
part that
that point.
surprised me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had,
Yeah.
I had, I didn't understand. I never knew that they were occupied yet, then liberated slash occupied
Yeah.
territory by the Japanese.
Yeah, the story
I knew they were occupied,
as I
not
had
that.
understood it was that they were occupied, and then there was the horrible Bataan Death March, and then there was this very, it was kind of a repressive sort of a thing, and that it was the fierce resistance of the people who had, a generation earlier resisted, McKinley's benevolent assimilation, who now sort of turned their weapons on and their guerrilla tactics on the Japanese. That was kind of the story as I understood it. So the idea that there's more to that story and that there was an element of, even if it was only sort of, we'll institute a puppet government because I mean, the Japanese did that, in Manchukuo too, right? So they had collaborators that they were, that allowed them to at least. I'm not, and I'm not even. I mean, I should know this better than I do. I'm not even really 100% convinced how much it was just propaganda, the whole, Asia for the Asians thing, and how much, it may have been something that to some extent they were really interested in and trying to do.
I mean, given what they did in the late 30s in China, they weren't particularly, and very, they were. I mean, the only positive thing I can say about sort of European uh, treatment of its Asian colonies was it wasn't as horrific as the Japanese.
And especially in Nanjing, places like that, yeah.
Yeah, Nanjing, and as described in this, what they did in the Philippines, and that's before, et cetera.
Mhm.
Things were pretty crappy in Singapore, lots of places. So,
Oh,
again, but that's the only saving grace was not as horrifying as the Japanese one.
Mhm.
Uh,
yeah.
Although it does seem like he wanted to go there on a smaller scale, like in Hawaii, you know, with U.S. He said military and civilian actions against Japanese women and things like that. So it's
Mhm.
so it's sort of a difference in degree maybe, and not in kind. And we're on the side of the angels. So what the hell?
Well, what's even worse though is the total lack of numbers of people who went against the United States in any of these cases. So it's all this work and effort that's being done for no reason other than just being inhuman towards other humans.
Yeah.
And to correct the record, I conflated Tuskegee Airmen with the Tuskegee experiment, which are
Yes,
kind of
right.
two
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
separate topics, although there may actually have been some overlap. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Knew what you meant. Uh,
um,
it is
although I
interesting
think,
though that
but
that
it
that the
this
military element may be the thing that connects them. Yeah.
yeah, the story broke in late 1972,
Mm.
and and hearings were called for almost immediately by our left-leaning friend, Senator Edward Kennedy, who who knew at least a little something about public health,
Hmm.
you know.
Yep.
Um, and then they ultimately paid some reparations.
Yeah.
But I interestingly, with respect to the war, there were some 250 plus airmen, or not airmen, but people who were in the experiment who tried to go into the war, and because they were in the study, they were refused medical treatment, even though as part of the indoctrination into the war, they were tested for syphilis and said, no, you can't have.
Jeez.
And I was like, oh, this is just great.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And that's roughly around the same time, though, that the Japanese internments became sort of, rose to the level of people thinking about it. I don't think people really talked about those,
Hmm.
and talked about reparations. I mean, yeah, I think, the Japanese, the Japanese, the interned Japanese Americans, they got their reparations, I think, in the mid '80s. But that was that process, and the
Yeah.
news about them had started, in the I feel like in the '70s, around the same time. Yeah, so.
Yeah. Yeah. It took them a while. It took them a while to get recognition. And I think it was Bill Clinton that finished the job for them. Yeah, but the interesting thing is that the Aleutians and the
Oh, yeah.
all these people who had so far been under the radar, and it was kind of funny because he does mention Neil Stephenson along the way, but he doesn't mention him in connection with the Aleutians, but still it's yeah, I thought it was interesting that I guess that's a generational sort of a thing, but
well, that the important thing is, do the instantiations of Peppermint Kings have a good Neil Stephenson reference of their own?
I
Because I saw that when I saw that pop up, I was like, oh, Dan's totally gonna.
yeah. Yep, it's funny. It may be more of a William Gibson. I'm thinking it's more of a, the future is already here, but it's just not evenly distributed kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
but yeah, the military element of this was really And also, I mean, and there is that sort of bad FDR moment when he talks about, how they're gonna run people like cattle through a thing, and they're gonna, there'll be a buzzing sound for 15 seconds, and then they'll be sterile after they get irradiated. So that whole thing was, I mean, it didn't surprise me that much. I guess it didn't change my opinion of FDR. But dang.
I was particularly interested, and I don't know where I have this in sort of in the chronology of the chapters, because I just read these three chapters, the chapters this morning. I read them this morning, and they're all very fresh in my head. With when sort of in the pre-World War II era, when a lot of when you had this real tension within the Philippines, and it's mostly the Philippine story. Obviously, there's a lot happening in Puerto Rico, but with this tension within the Philippines leadership on, do they, yes, we want independence, but we don't want it yet because we can't defend ourselves, and Japan is rising,
right,
and things like that, and that was a strange story to me.
Yeah. The other strange element to that was kind of the tariff thing. Oh, wait a minute, 95% of our goods go to America. So if now all of a sudden we're less internal and they stick a tariff on us as if we're foreigners, then our economy is tanked. So,
but then on top of that, there's also the story that the mainland doesn't necessarily rely on any of the things from its territories, which is even worse. So it's like we would be reliant on this relationship that they really don't care about on any axis of the
well, it certainly wasn't as important
world.
on the American side as it was on the Filipino side, right? So there's a mismatch in the level of
Manila paper, and that's pretty much it.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
and rope, yeah.
And most Americans have no idea that, Manila and Manila are both the same Manila.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't until I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and so, yeah, right. Ours.
But it's still important today.
Yeah. Although, is it really that, or is it just now a coloring that makes it seem to be that?
Oh yeah, I don't know if it's still manufactured the same way. Although,
Well, the envelopes are manila envelopes are tougher.
I think it's just stock wood paper.
Really? Okay.
I don't know. I have no evidence. I mean, Chris would be the one who would know.
I haven't looked. I have a note to look it up to find out, which is probably the same thing Dan wrote in the margin. Is
right.
Well, I would suspect that there would be a similar history to Manila as there would be to hemp.
Right.
And only maybe later because, Manila was more protected because it came from just this one place, and hemp, and Hearst and Pulitzer were down on hemp because it was competing in markets where they were, where they already were and were trying to shift to wood pulp. So I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, as kind of a commodity. And actually, it's sort of funny. I was talking to my folks the other day, and we were talking about foods and we were talking a little bit about sort of manufactured agribusiness, General Mills-y kind of foods. And one of the things that sort of struck me was we really just sort of take it on faith that the food that's in the box with the same name is the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago, which I think is probably much less true and probably is untrue in almost all cases in a huge way.
Well, one of the things that struck me going through chapter 6 and 7, particularly with all the the territories coming on board and how often you had to go back to intervene to make them a sensible government again and then pop back out again. That I quite like. But there was a comment about for more than 30 years, the Cuban Constitution contained the astonishing clause to grant the US the right to invade Cuba, which it did 4 times. When I was reading that, my mind went, only 4 times? Yeah. Oh, for the love of Plantagenets type thing. And then a little bit further on, I must admit, I got really racist with the thing. By this time, it had moved to Wilson, who's my favourite bad guy from the Versailles Conference post-World War I. Wilson didn't think non-whites as subhuman, as some around him did, but he regarded many of them as children requiring training, children and training both in quotes, before they could rule themselves. The nightmare scenario in his mind was that the children might gain power when they weren't ready to wield.
Right.
Right? I roll back and think of things like a few meetings a few years ago with Angela Merkel having to explain things to the then toddler in the White House. And there were a few instances of where there were other memes during the first term and lots more in the second term of you should just come back to the monarchy and be done with it because you clearly are not ready to be adults. and in the context
is important, right? Because is it the voters who are not ready, or is it the leaders who are not ready?
And in the context of not being too nationalistic about it, I go back to our first book and wrote down, historically well-educated Jesuits were out-debated by candlelight. So how could the Klansmen of 2 or 3 generations later hope to be equal to the British monarchy? You are welcome to come back as subjects because we're now citizens, but subjects will be the lower class of children who need to be looked after.
Yeah.
So that I thought was an interesting.
Americans come by their exceptionalism very naturally, you know. In fact, it strikes me this week my kid has been on a Hamilton kick, and I think she's watched it 3 or 4 times.
Oh, wow.
But I'm always struck by, you know, King George showing up in his little musical reverie and, you know, oh, you'll be back.
Yep.
You know, like you're the kids need dad's love. And it's seen even there, but we now view it with amusement and mirth, when we do the same exact thing to fucking everybody else. Like, you know.
Well, and at that point, it was interesting because Immerwahr kind of tries to draw this distinction, right, between our internal imperialism with Puerto Rico as contrasted with Cuba, but then this other stuff that's going on throughout Latin America. You know, it's right about that passage that you mentioned, Tim, where he's talking about, you know, that there's this weird clause in the Cuban Constitution and, you know, 4 times. But then right after that, in the next paragraph, he gives a list of the 3 times here and 4 times there and 2 times there. So we were practicing this same thing. And then he kind of calls it dollar diplomacy, which he says, well, it's really just, you know, it's the other side of the coin of gunboat.
Mexico was on the list.
Yeah, Mexico was on the list too.
3 or 4 times you had to go into Mexico.
Well, we said, we practiced for the First World War deployment by chasing Pancho Villa around South Texas.
I don't know if I mentioned, so I was in Mexico City in November, my first time visiting.
How was it?
It was amazing, and my Spanish is useless. My high school Spanish is completely useless. I can read reasonably well, but language, speak anyway. But and it was only a 3-day trip, whatever. But the last a museum I stumbled across randomly is the Museum of the Interventions, they call it. And it's not that, it's like a 20-minute walk from where Leon Trotsky got shot. Leon Trotsky got shot in the Frida Kahlo Museum. I just wandered past it accidentally on the way to the subway. Yeah. And it is but what it is it's a museum of all the times that, since independence, Mexico has been invaded by Spain, France, and the United States. And I didn't, and one of the sort of the last big intervention they mention is, Blackjack Pershing and the U.S. Expeditionary Force were in Mexico for years, and the only reason they left was because they had to be sent off to Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But also, this whole perspective of these, was fascinating. I just was completely. I'm reading. I'm fortunate that I can read Spanish reasonably well to do some stuff. But yeah, again, I did that. The story of how often we have invaded invaded our neighbors, and that was interesting there. But then also, we've taught even Immerwahr's book, he basically gives 2 sentences to and we invaded we invaded Mexico half a dozen times, we spent 30 solid years here in Haiti, but that's all. He just sort of hand waves it beyond that.
And I thought that was kind of weird, because I don't know, maybe he'll go there, maybe I think that maybe he'll go there later I haven't read ahead, so maybe he'll go there later in the book, or maybe he will deliberately not, because because he wants to talk about these maps, right? And so, so us intervening in Guatemala or Honduras or Chile or Iran is not an expression of empire in the way that he wants to talk about empire, but it certainly is in every other way. So I don't really see the what's in the subreddit. Let's see, Reddit, alternate history comments, Mexican-American War. Yeah. Second Mexican-American War. Well, and second.
Anyway, if you look, there's a map linked to it, which has
at the top,
ideas.
Yeah. Well, the Mexican Revolution was kind of interesting. When I was first studying Latin America, I was like, well, the Mexicans, had a revolution, that followed the Grito de Dolores in beginning in 1811, and they got their independence by the early 1820s, and they had their constitution and all that, and they outlawed slavery. But then they had a revolution in 1920. So it's like, oh wow, this is this stuff just continues. It's ongoing, right? And then they have this new constitution, which gives the subsoil assets, gives says it's the patrimony of the people, right? So then Lázaro Cárdenas nationalizes the oil and creates Pemex, and FDR, to his credit, didn't follow the advice or take or follow the pleas of the American oil interests at the time and go in, because it was, the Great Depression was on, and it didn't seem to him to be prudent at the time, I guess.
And again, that's one of the things that comes from, or at least Immerwahr is saying, and it probably makes sense, is sort of our disenchantment with empire largely happens during the Depression, because we feel like, we need to spend these resources on on the logo, as he calls it.
Right, and on big projects in the logo, right? TVA and and Muscle Shoals, and kind of all these
dams.
Yeah. What do they say in the South about Muscle Shoals, Chris? About the whole, because that became the place where all of the nitrate came from, ultimately, I think, for the Second World War effort.
We scraped nitrate out of the Muscle Shoals area? Or?
We generated electricity, and then we used the Haber-Bosch process.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and it's now a big source of anhydrous ammonia, I think, for the ag industry, to whatever is left over of it. But yeah, I mean and I was kind of surprised you didn't go back to that story too. The story of, once we get to, to the death of Clara, it seemed like the nitrate story just kind of fell off the map. But
I didn't do it yet, but I was kind of struck by the hookworm story being told again. And for those who've been with us long enough to remember that we read, was it Nancy Eisenberg, I think was her name, her history book, Poor White Trash,
trash, yeah.
ages ago, which had a chapter somewhere in the first half of the book, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of wanted to go back and compare the treatment of those two stories as told there. But it also dawns on me too that a hidden, an unseen story is if there are so many poor white trash in the South who are, you know, ridden with hookworms and issues, would that not have been the same case for slaves at the time
Oh,
who
sure.
also potentially would have had that? But that was never spoken of as an issue, or,
Right.
what are the long-term effects of multiple generations of that type of disease?
It probably was useful politically, or sort of to help suppress,
Yeah. Wait, keep them weak so they don't run away, but
Well,
still.
well, also when I was when I was in that section, and I was aware of the hookworm story, and I had read about, I guess when I was reading about, sort of first and second wave progressivism, right? So the original the original country life movement, under Teddy Roosevelt, right, and people like Horace Plunkett, right, who came in, and and then once again with all of this kind of rural renewal stuff that happened during Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. To what extent is that sort of internal imperialism? And then with the hookworm also, and the the downtroddenness and the apathy and all of that's blamed for hookworm. And I mean, that James Scott would have said, well, that's weapons of the weak, right? That's passive resistance, right? That's why all peasants everywhere and all unfree workers everywhere are imagined as being dumb and dull and incompetent and lazy and all that, because they're passively resisting, right? So
Yeah.
how much is each?
Well, or are we going backwards? So, Kennedy currently, the NIH and the CDC are not doing what they had been done. So the CDC has now issued fewer warnings about diseases in America in this administration compared to the same time in the prior one. At the same time, we know there are outbreaks of measles in a half a dozen states, and a disease which has been essentially eliminated has now come back with hundreds and hundreds of cases in the US, and people are now dying and suffering from it, once again in ways that, didn't exist since, or haven't existed since the times we're talking about. So we're actively letting these kind of diseases of the poor in some sense come back. So how long is it before, we have hookworm infestations in the South again?
Yeah. Well, and how long is it until until we get to the world of Elysium, right, where the ultra elite, sort of, maybe don't live on a satellite, but they just jet around in their private jets from Davos to the next, to Aspen, to wherever the next, conference is, and the people living below them and beneath them just sort of languish, and don't have, and only, to kind of give the other political perspective on what you just said, Chris, to look at it from the other perspective, are only ever told about a disease when there is an opportunity for a pharma company to make a lot of money by producing a vaccine for it.
Or, hey, AI hasn't replaced the workers enough, so we have to worry about this disease because we don't have enough workers to keep the factory and the mines
right,
running.
or because we can, there will probably be a point where some work will be so low that it won't pay to deploy an Optimus robot to do it. And then there will be people for that. And so we got to keep a couple of people around.
Immerwahr kind of mentions that kind of economic thing. Like, we can throw a ton of money at a road because it means something for the military in a war effort. Yet we don't even have, even the minutest amount of resources to build the trains for these poor people we're interning, a couple hundred miles away. And yet we deem it necessary for whatever purpose to, put the dark-skinned people in a camp, but not the same people on the same island to protect them because they're white.
Yeah.
Well,
and there is a lot of continuity between sort of the other empires, right? I mean, this stuff that he's talking about is happening, not that many years distant from Winston Churchill saying, well, how can there be a famine in Bengal if Gandhi is still alive? So,
yeah, what's making me want to kind of revisit this too is versions of empire in other pieces of my notes of how did other older empires, the Roman Empire, the Egyptian, there's probably I've read a lot less on the Mongol Empire, but there are pieces of that was kind of like they set out satellites and it was, we only want tribute so much more than we want to control what's going on. But in the US case, it's we want the tribute, but we also want to force you to do what we want to force you to do, which is dramatically different. And then there's, older empires. I've been doing some reading on Sargon the Great lately that at least how those, empires were treated and done, particularly in times where communication is not what it is today, which we sometimes take dramatically for granted that if you're going to communicate with an area 800 miles away that is part of your empire, it's not easy.
Right.
It doesn't go quick.
Yeah. And I think that maybe Immerwahr misses kind of that point as well, right? Because he's always saying that the reason that we don't want Mexico is because of all the Mexicans living in it. The reason that we don't want, we don't really want to integrate these other places because of this is because of the color line, right? Is because these people look different, and not, I don't want to completely minimize that, but from earlier American history, there's always this anxiety in the center about overextending, right? This happens with the Louisiana Purchase. It happens with the Mexican-American War and Manifest Destiny. It happens, with the North, the far Northwest, beyond the Northwest Territory. There's always this fear that people are going to become different enough that, and because the communication, takes so long, like you were saying about Sargon's time. I mean, all the way through, the era of, speed of communication at the speed of light, right, over telegraph or, radio or things like that. Really, it's until then that we have, a telephone, that we have these problems with culturally integrating. And we don't seem to have understood it in the way, I mean, the British arguably had, that problem in space, but apparently dealt with it and didn't worry about it. And and he also talked several times about how, well, the British have a colonial house in in London, where they, it's this sort of monument to the empire, but it's also an administrative center, right? Where this communication is organized and is centralized. Go ahead, Will.
Well,
The British and I think the difference there. Well, okay, so going back to your Roman Empire or sort of earlier empires, those are empires of assimilation fundamentally. I mean, if you've been to the Pantheon in Rome, the point of the Pantheon wasn't the elevation of the Roman gods; it was the elevation. Yes, all the gods gets to be, so once you could become, they were trying to make greater Rome. But definitely what the British Empire is doing and what our attempts at empire are doing when we leave the logo is a mercantilism. Is when we're trying to the point being for these empires is that we are trying to it's about trade. It's about the guy he brings up, Mahan. This is about trade and trade and resources rather than expanding our actual empire. It's actual mercantilist colonies, and that's I think where you get the real difference between between how they how we don't have that's why we say we don't have an empire. We just have trading partners off someplace. I don't know where I'm going with all that, but anyway, I'm done. Sorry.
Well, that was interesting because you mentioned the Pantheon, and and the Pantheon kind of strikes me as, and of course the thing that they had against the early Christians was that they wouldn't be in this sort of pan, kind of thing. They only wanted the one, right? They could, because
they refused to acknowledge the other gods,
to acknowledge the existence and or at least the importance of the other gods. But so maybe it's about, maybe that Pantheon thing kind of goes along with sort of a cosmopolitan sort of a sense, where our empire is different because it's a much more parochial thing.
Well, and another quick example, by the way, we think of the Ottoman Empire, which was complete. You could have Christians, Jews, anybody but Hindus.
Right.
But they're all allowed.
Right, and the patriarch of the Orthodox Church is invited to stay, and also they're making money, right? Because the jizya is taxing them, right? So there's an administrative benefit.
But also in ancient cultures, when you invaded another city and you took it over, it wasn't our gods and their gods, but typically it was seen as, oh, their gods are the same as our gods. They just have a different name. It's the same god of the hearth or the
function. The god of the function.
The functions are the same. And in particular, for some of the big ones, like, oh, there is a sun god. Well, there can only be one sun god, and that sun god just has different names, but he's doing the same thing for all the people. Or the moon god. So it's not, those things are not big. But what kind of strikes me is the thing that Christianity does, particularly when meshed with capitalism, is by having only one God, we seem to have taken ownership of that God, and we have made that God what we want it to be rather than historically what that God showed up to do. So it's not, Christianity is not the religion of Jesus. It's a religion now about Jesus, and we own it. And we're going to say which pieces we totally have capitalized it and, invaded it as an empire to make it do what we want it to do now as a culture, which is the really shocking thing compared to, and the difference too is when we talk about older religions, typically there are modern religions and we use the word religion. But generally, when we look at older indigenous cultures, we use the word myth to describe the religion. and the shape and function and form of it is dramatically different than what we use now. So we even use a different word to describe those older religions and their myths now rather than
Our
actual
theology.
religion.
To specifically your point, just a quick addenda is, yes, it was not just, Christianity, it was Protestant Christianity. There were 20 million, 8 million Catholics in the Philippines, but, and a whole bunch of Catholics in Mexico and Puerto Rico. And so they weren't really Christian. They were those myth people, like you're saying, because they've got all their idols and stuff and blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
That's kind of a missing piece that I wish there was a little more discussion of the political piece of what role did religion play here or not in some of these pieces, because it's just a totally sidelined bit of topic, but it's in
I don't think
waspy logo America.
Well,
at the
waspy
time.
especially. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, both of you. I don't think that it's millenarian kind of, even the evangelical kind of end time stuff that we've got now. But I do think that there is a very waspy sense that our Christianity is the real Christianity, and those people who still parrot the Latin mass that they don't understand are they're little better than the savages who have myths where we
But what and that's what's so striking too is we haven't even gotten up to the time of JFK, who's the first Catholic president.
Right.
And people are worried, like honestly worried in America, like what's going on here? Like, is this guy
he's gonna be under the thumb of the
bowing
Pope.
to the Pope?
And remember which Pope it was that they were afraid he was going to be bowing to.
Yeah.
Right? That was John the 23rd, wasn't it? That was
but it shows you just how much the Catholic Church lost and was severed, that and it's the original church of Jesus, for centuries now.
Yeah. Well, and Tim's point in the chat, right? So so it was, and this does go all the way back to sort of the beginning of the Reformation and the wars of religion in Europe, and the Dutch revolt in the Spanish Netherlands, and then the Treaty of Tordesillas, which actually I had always thought that the Treaty of Tordesillas was sort of an edict by the Pope. It was actually what actually happened was that the Pope acknowledged the Spanish claims because there had been a previous papal edict that Portugal just got everything. But then once Columbus came back with his discovery on behalf of Spain, the Portuguese King João II, I think it was, objected, and the Pope said no, they can have that at Thanksgiving, and then the Portuguese got super paranoid that they were going to lose it all, right? So then they kind of went to the negotiating table with Ferdinand and Isabella, and they hammered out the Treaty of Tordesillas, which the Pope then did bless. But it was given that it was a negotiation, it's kind of interesting that the Spanish took the much iffier of the two options, right? They let the Portuguese keep everything along the African coast and their route under the bottom of Africa into the Indian Ocean and all of that. That kind of created the Portuguese mercantile empire. And they took the mystery box to the west, which turned out to be worth a whole lot more than they probably had ever expected in that moment.
Yeah. Which just shows you how much power Amazon has by having all the data.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
they
rolled the dice.
That's how you control the future. Yep. We've seen what happened with the Portuguese and the Spanish and how big their empires are now. Yep. The key is having the data to know where the value is going to come from in the future.
Yeah.
And then take that.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I was listening while I was puttering around the apartment here this morning. I was listening to the All In podcast, which I usually listen to on a Friday, but it's Saturday morning, and so I was catching up with it. And they were talking about they were talking in their sort of tech VC triumphalist ways about the merger that's happening, that's going to happen, right? Between XAI and SpaceX. So it's all going to become one thing. And it just a light bulb went off over my head about robots on Mars. It's all going to be robots on Mars. Humans cannot live on Mars, right? And they're pretending that that's not the case. But the light bulb that went off for me this morning was Elon is certainly not so dumb as to think that humans are going to be able to get to Mars and live on Mars, but he's going to have robots. So my prediction, right? I'm predicting it right here, right now, is that the next big science fiction epic is not going to be the expanse world of the Martian, the MCRN, Navy and the Belters and the Earth, the people down the well wallas. It's going to be about the Martian robots versus wanting their independence finally from the humans who are restricted to Earth and to very short stays on the moon.
Well, to pull it back to reality with respect to this book,
Okay.
we all know that Kuato in Total Recall was just a replay of the Philippines on Mars.
Yeah. 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 So
see how I kept it on topic there?
way to go. Yeah. And you pulled it and with a Philip K. Dick reference at the same time. Yeah. That's like the best of all worlds. Yeah.
Hey, I helped produce the movie Paycheck once upon a time, so.
Oh, wow. All right. Cool. Some of your backstory. Some of the mystery of Chris's backstory.
Yeah. Oh, that one's going deep. That's like, that's 20 plus years ago. I think that's Ben Affleck still in his 20s.
Wow. Wow. Oh, what is automatic noodle? What is this? What am I looking at here, Eric? I just followed your link.
Leftover robots.
Oh, okay.
Not on Mars, though.
All right. Leftover robots opening a noodle shop. All right, cool. Yeah. Yeah. What are we
So already people are
Mhm.
thinking forward.
Yep. Surplus to requirements. Yeah. Yeah. That's gonna happen. That might happen quick. Yeah, yeah, there was a lot of the Philippines. I thought it was I have to say, as a writer, I appreciated the way that he gave us this triumph of architecture by the Filipinos for the Filipinos, and then he bombed the shit out of it. Or then he described how he got the shit bombed out of it.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
Well, it also is an interesting case study if you're an architect and you think, oh, I could be, the next Da Vinci or the next super genius.
Monument for the ages.
Yeah. When you think about how much you really need and rely on all the people below you and around you in the communities to make a thing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in stark relief to me too, as I watch local communities who are dealing now with how do we get permits to rebuild houses to live in the spaces where we were.
Right.
And, one of the solutions, the easy solutions, although I'm not sure how much it's really helping, is there's a couple of groups that have pre-designed a handful of homes and home styles, and you can pick from a menu of 10 houses that are kind of pre-approved, but it's still not speeding things up that much but then are you going to have, and what's curious is Altadena grew up and was built kind of on the wilds of the border of Los Angeles as it goes into a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a place that a lot of neighborhoods did not have sidewalks. They did not have street lights. They were kind of built into wilderness on the side of Los Angeles. So there's a very kind of artsy, quirky bent to how that grew up.
Hmm.
And now here are these cookie cutter options for rebuilding
Right.
this place, and you should do it kind of you should do it the way we want you to do it rather than, the wilding of the
Right.
space the way it originally grew up. And
Which had been more organic. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Those
it's
properties
interesting to
were
see
prone to
some of
fire.
the pushback that happens there from that architectural perspective.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I will say this, and I'll apologize up front because I'm talking right out of my ass. I don't know anything about this, but
you're a cisgender white guy, you got the license.
okay, okay. Well, and especially about this topic, I haven't studied it, but I wonder, as you're saying that, how much. I mean, so it was this organic thing. It came up in kind of this bohemian way at the edge of LA and stuff, but then it became expensive and posh and exclusive and all kinds of ordinances and and administrative and legal structures were built up to sort of make it exclusive in those ways. And are they now sort of biting the community in the ass?
No, it's not. Altadena is a weird thing because there isn't a municipal government.
Oh.
It's overseen, and it's one of the reasons they're having issues is it's a county commissioner who really oversees the area, and it's LA County that does all the ordinances and all the stuff, and even the utilities are kind of a patchwork of you get water from here and you get water from there, and so it's a quirkier. So in some sense, there's a lot less red tape because of that structure versus like the Palisades that's both in the county and part of kind of LA City oversees chunks of it. And then there's the local Palisades thing itself. On top of, and the Palisades has immensely larger wealth comparatively, whereas a huge chunk of what burned in Altadena is actually now second and third generation wealth in the African American community, and it's really was never reported at the national level, I don't think. But if you were African American in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you couldn't live in parts of LA. And so they all moved and went outside of LA, and a huge proportion of them bought and owned land in Altadena.
Mm,
So it was African American wealth that just got wiped out.
mm,
And how do you maintain that? Because those houses, the land and the property were purchased for like 10 or $20,000 decades ago. And yes, now they're worth, you know, between the lowest end $600,000 for a small home
mhm.
up to 1 million or more.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of that wealth is going to be wiped out because it's hard to rebuild, and a lot of those properties were underinsured.
Mhm.
So it's really hit this community pretty hard because of that generational wealth that was being built and now just like totally got wiped out.
Mhm.
And there's some cultural issues with a lot of those neighborhoods got no warning, advance warning at all. Like they were not evacuated. And
Mhm.
so people died as a result. And it was kind of like, well, did they die because it was an African American community and we didn't care? And so nobody said anything.
Wow.
And the people who did get out, it was neighbors going door to door, like knocking in the middle of the night saying,
Mhm.
3 a.m., you need to leave.
Right. Right. Wow.
Whereas further west in the white communities, there were police cars going up and down streets knocking on doors,
Mhm.
like, get the hell out
Mhm.
hours earlier.
Right.
And that didn't happen on the west side, but it was also a fast moving incident, too, is really where they're relying on,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, this is why it didn't happen, is because it went out of proportion and we didn't have,
Mhm.
there were people, I remember actually looking it up. I think the city of Pasadena has 9 engine companies for fire, And it's fine if you have one or two house fires,
Hmm.
you've got enough fire engines to do 4 or 5 fires all at once.
Hmm.
And even when you can pull in resources from surrounding cities,
Right.
you could do a couple dozen fires, but how do you, in the span of 2 or 3 days, 10,000 structures catch on fire?
Right.
You don't have and so people are like, oh, they let this whole city burn, and I'm like, they had to let it burn. They
Right.
like if you send 3 fire trucks to one house,
Yep.
like that happened in the first hour. All
Hmm.
of their resources were committed for the
Yeah.
city,
Yep.
and then all of the surrounding cities are even smaller. So it's not like they have 500 fire trucks to send over.
Right.
Like you're that's a losing battle in the span of 3 days to lose 10,000 structures.
Hmm.
Like you could have had all the resources in the entire state of California here that
Right.
morning, and you
Yeah.
still would have lost the battle.
Right. Yep.
You know.
Yep.
Interesting corollary, though, to the uh, FDR's choice. Well, we're going to ignore.
Mm.
We don't have the resources to deal with
Right.
our
I think there's much more.
we have to do Europe first. Yeah.
There's much more that could be said about Germany first. Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's a whole another book. Yeah. Or many books. Right. But it's, yeah, the, yeah, the way that those decisions get made and the I guess the people for whom they get made. Um, yeah, but Stephen Miller says that you don't have a right to live you don't have any inherent right to live in the city that you live in. If it gets too expensive, move out.
Yeah, that's always the easy solution is like, and what's even worse though is we are now in a society where your family ties that traditionally would have kept you bound to one place
Right, extended
are
family.
not as close as they were 3 generations back.
Absolutely.
But even still, the vast majority, when you have a pandemic, people lose jobs, they can't work. You then go back and you rely on those family connections to survive and care for yourself.
Hmm.
And you need that, and society needs that fungible space. Otherwise, there would have been a much more massive collapse
Yeah.
during the pandemic
Right.
than we saw. So it's, yes, Stephen Miller, you can pick up and move and go somewhere else, but the problem is, people have been picking up and moving from Guatemala for
Hmm.
3 decades now, and
Yeah.
oh no, you can't pick up and move because we don't want you.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna put you in shackles and send you back.
Yeah.
So you can't just pick up and move, dumb idiot.
Yeah. Well, I think he was talking about white people.
Yep.
He was talking about the sons and daughters of white people who like the who is it the plumber in Moonstruck, right? Who lives in that expensive neighborhood
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Staten Island or wherever it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, based on that, we should, because Stephen Miller's family has not been in the U.S. even for 3 generations, so
Oh, send
we
him
should
back.
send him back.
Yeah, Nick Cage's family was generationally,
Oh,
but
what?
that's a windfall, I guess.
I don't think I've ever heard it spoken of, but is Stephen Miller identify as religious?
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe.
Is he a white Christian nationalist?
He's not a Christian.
I don't think he's a Christian.
Well, in
His
behavior
forebears
or
are.
in name.
Well, anything. I does he, JD Vance at least plays that I go to church and I identify as something, and I
I
presume
identify
he
as Catholic, except for the fact that I go against what they're saying.
Well, he
yeah,
killed
yeah,
the
except
Pope,
for
so
except
how
for all the
Catholic could
stuff
he
Jesus said specifically.
be?
Well, to quote Nietzsche, the last Christian died on the cross.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Wow, we've had Nietzsche. We've had a bunch of things today.
But no, Stephen Miller. I mean, obviously his grandparents were Belarusian Jews who came over right before the exclusion, the 1924 exclusion stuff.
Mm.
So I believe their name got anglicized at Ellis Island.
Mm.
Hmm.
Well, all right.
Just part of the reason why everybody in his family has disowned it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. All right. But to pull it back to the pages that we're in, MacArthur struck me. I mean, and the way that he deals with MacArthur kind of struck me as sort of interesting.
Yeah, a lot of that MacArthur background story I did not know.
Yeah.
Or even kind of comparing and contrasting him to Eisenhower under him at the time and what
Yeah.
they thought of,
Right.
oh, I'll give up my commission and go work for the Philippine military because I can choose my own uniform. Like the little details like that, like just stunning to me. Like
Yeah.
this all-American war hero, like.
But with huge tactical failures, which
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know any of this MacArthur. I suppose I should have paid more attention in social studies in whatever, 8th grade, but I don't think it was discussed, perhaps.
Well, it's like all things though. We wish there was so much more in this book
Yeah.
that we know could have been in this book, but you're limited.
Mhm.
But similarly, and that's the tough part about the mythology that we tell ourselves and teach our students,
Mhm.
as we build this empire, is there's only so much you can try and get into an eighth grader's head or ninth or 10th grader. And, it's can't all be US history.
Yeah.
I think most places it's usually around fourth grade, you do your state history
Mhm.
as the introduction, but
Yeah.
it's the introduction to what's around you. So it's your state first.
Mhm.
And then roughly somewhere, either eighth grade, you do a little more history. 10th grade, most US high
US.
schools is American history.
9th grade used to be Western Civ.
And then you do world history,
Yeah, we
or
did like European. Yeah.
really Occidental history is, much more than
Yep.
world history. But there's only so much you can jam into a high school kid's head.
Right.
And if
And
you're in
most of it
Texas,
is the mythology, not
Right.
the hey, you
Right.
you
Well,
don't you can't possibly get to the level of
and
failures on the military front in the Philippines.
which is kind of the interesting stuff. But
Yeah.
if you're in Texas, you'll do the Texas history in elementary school and high school and often college.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll do a
Well,
semester. of
And
Texas.
I mean the thing, even if you get the the sort of the tactical failures, I mean this sort of psychopathology element of it
Yeah.
is just
He has some very Freudian stuff
yeah.
that he sort of pokes at, but doesn't hammer too hard, which
Yeah.
probably to his benefit.
Yeah. I mean it'd be yeah, I mean, and you're right, Chris. I mean, these guys were heroes, the corncob pipe and the, and all of that. And the,
Yeah.
but J. Edgar Hoover was a hero too.
And that's where we get, James Fenimore Cooper in the stories from last week. A lot of our mythology is done more in the popular fiction literature
Mhm.
than it is in the history class.
Yeah.
And I've been reminded, it's odd, I've been reminded at least twice this week, and I don't think it's as widely reported as the Epstein files are coming out. So I'll make it as a mini poll.
Okay.
Does anyone in the group of the five of us, besides me, know what Ghislaine Maxwell's father did
Oh yeah.
and
Yes.
his influence? Okay, so at least we're reasonably well educated enough to know. But this guy owns a major publisher and owns the ideas that are being put into those eighth grade, textbooks
Right.
as a
That's
means of
why that's why he got the hero's burial. It was his contributions to education.
But specific to MacArthur, I mean, again, I'm sure that a lot of why the history, the legend of MacArthur was written at the time it was being made. So the important thing wasn't, oh, this idiot almost intentionally left it left the airplanes on, just there. Everybody knew they're coming. Why are you leaving?
Right.
That wasn't, when this guy is the only person who's willing to, the only person we have available to, and who seems to be willing to marshal resources to defend the Asian colony.
And it struck, and I agree. And it struck me that the story that Immerwahr is not telling, which I think is probably behind all of this, is that MacArthur gets a stand down order.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's pissed. And this is why, and I think that and that's a hypothetical, right? But that does explain his future. I mean, all the way to wanting to nuke China, and to talking trash about Truman and getting fired. He's mad. He's angry for the rest of his career.
Oh, I mean, I want to make sure. You're suggesting, are you saying that you think he got a stand down order of leave the planes on the ground, or I don't know where you're going?
I think that he was it strikes me that he was interested enough in the Philippines that he probably wanted to protect them. He probably wanted to defend them.
Mm-hmm.
And I do sort of, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory anymore, or if it's just, something that's kind of being accepted as the common knowledge that we don't want to talk about, that the American administration, the Roosevelt administration knew that the Japanese were going to strike somewhere. And it was obvious that the Philippines would have been a huge target. So it's hard for me to believe that, that if you accept that one thing, right, that there's foreknowledge that there is going to be, that something is going to happen, that you wouldn't say, ooh, there's a strategic target that we maybe ought to think about protecting. So,
well, I think there's at least the story given though here is that he'd already quit the U.S. military.
Yeah,
once, and he quit it he quit it with the idea that there's. That he wants to defend the Philippines, and the Philippines needs to be defended. And I mean, I find it difficult to imagine that he wouldn't, he barely gotten anything he really wanted anyway. It's difficult I find it difficult to imagine he actually would have he would have obeyed a stand down order. He'd shown enough independence already. I mean, that's a total separate thing from the, were there intelligence failures, and maybe even the. I don't think it is common knowledge. I don't think it is settled knowledge that FDR decided to, just let December 7th, 8th actually happen.
I'm not saying specifically that moment was, they intercepted a telegram and they said, oh no, we won't warn them. But I think there was a general, I think that what has been accepted was that there is a general understanding that the Japanese, I mean, especially at the tail end of the embargo, they're getting desperate, right? So they've got, I think that it would be hard to be a strategic planner in America and not say there's going to be a response. Right.
Well, he did spend some time earlier in the book talking about, was FDR even going to mention these other territories in the speech?
Mm-hmm.
It's the intro.
First day, and it was, hey, we're just going to use Hawaii as the, we've been attacked, not all these other places also got attacked within hours as well. And most people think, that happened a week or 2 weeks later historically, when it was part and parcel essentially of the same plan of attack.
Well, I think that at the time when I first read that in the first week, I thought, okay, this sort of telegraphs a more.
Yeah, well,
I was sort of agreeing with him at that point. That it speaks to their idea about about the Philippines' position and this empire argument that Immerwahr, it was clearer to me then, I think, than it is now, having gone through this. And I will say you've convinced me of another plausible scenario, right? Mm-hmm. Which could be that knowing or suspecting that MacArthur is a loose cannon who may not obey a stand down order, maybe we put him in an information blackout. Maybe we Tulsi Gabbard him.
But I think the text that we have implies that he was informed
Yeah.
and locked himself in a room for 8 hours to meditate. I mean that's the mystery, right? And the author calls that out as unknown what happens during that time where he didn't do anything.
And both then as now, do you really get maverick, independent people at that level?
Yeah.
For me, the interesting thing is the contrast for him versus all of the other pieces of the empire. Most of the governors that are talked about and discussed in the book, had never been to Puerto Rico before they were assigned to go there. So there's no personal invested interest for any of these people being given these assignments. Even the when it's all during the war given to one person, like he's been to Puerto Rico, but it was like a stopover trip on his way to somewhere else. And like, I don't know who these people are. I've never been there. I couldn't even tell you what their number one export is, kind of thing. And it's like, and to me, the contrast with MacArthur is he's been in this place and he's invested enough.
Well, he's got history.
If I leave, I would go work for, a non-US, political leadership to stay and build a military here and help them out, which to me is a super fascinating contrast.
Yeah.
And I want to know way more about the wheres and why-fors and motivations for that as a thing. Like he marries and his wife is from there and he,
Yeah, and he had
those things are, so it's how do you, when you're trying to improve the places, or if you're trying to even improve Puerto Rico now, how can you appoint those governors and those people so that they have ties to the land, that they're willing to help improve it, not only for the people who are there, but for the bigger logo map US enterprise?
Yeah.
And instead of keep sending these freaking idiots who don't know and don't care and let's just experiment on the people, or let's move them somewhere else. In fact, that was one of the things that really struck me about the Aleutian piece, is in reading about the Mesopotamian cultures and empires. And historically, we haven't known much about ancient Assyrians or the Mesopotamian empires until the 1880s and on, when we were able to translate what we found archaeologically. But I'm sure pieces of those knowledge pushed on. But one of the inventions for helping to create empire, and I don't know if it was Sargon that was one of the first, but he would take over the neighboring city, and as a means of holding power, he would displace the people who lived there and move them somewhere else, miles away. And then it becomes much harder for them because of subsistence, of trying to provide for yourself and keep your family afloat and start a new farm or a new whatever.
And also feeling like I'm not fighting for my homeland.
When you're worried about feeding the family, you've moved to a new place and they're going to support you, but only so insofar as you're not going to rebel against the new king.
Like Stalin did.
And that is one of the kind of new and interesting means of controlling populations within an empire at that time. And I'm sure it had been reinvented in other places. But, using that as a means of displacing people just enough that it's hard for them to rebel against you, versus, you keep your same house and it's a whole lot easier for you to.
Well, and you perceive the other guy, the new guy, as someone who's invading your ancestral homelands. right?
Yeah.
Which now all of a sudden, oh, I'm new here. I have nothing. I don't have that at all. Yeah. I wonder
Well,
though, I mean, that I guess maybe part of my problem is I'm not 100% believing the way that Immerwahr is depicting MacArthur, because I think MacArthur is a very complicated, and kind of crazy character, and almost like a kind of a, I mean, the way that we've been talking to him, the name that kind of popped into my head is T.E. Lawrence, right? Who also is I don't think really understood in a kind of a way that probably does justice to him.
Have you read Seven Pillars of Wisdom?
No, I owned it once and I never actually got around
It's
to
a
reading
wonderful
it.
book.
Is it?
It's an absolutely wonderful book. But again, you're getting his perspective, which is. But I mean, yeah. To your point, I would love to. I mean, the biggest thing I've gotten out of this book so far is I would love to read a critical and interesting biography of MacArthur. I'm going to go find one. Yeah.
well, the question though too to contrast it is Shirley Rhodes also in this book is a very complicated character.
Right.
But because of how he's presented, it's very easy to wallpaper over his treatment of these people.
Mm-hmm.
But in broad historical American context, the guy is this big hero and keeps getting promoted up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until what was it, like the 80s or 90s that like anybody even complains about his treatment of the Puerto Ricans
Yeah.
decades before
Mm-hmm.
that this medical institution is even aware of his like questionable history.
They don't even also know about, because he didn't just do it in Puerto Rico, or he did it to U.S. soldiers.
Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, well if he's done this.
Mm-hmm.
But the question too is,
very Fritz
what was the
Hoffman.
leadership over him that's promoting him all along the way? Are they doing it actively because they actively know what he's doing and how he's doing it, or do they just think, oh, he's educated and a man of science,
He was the
so
science.
we're gonna trust him, as like the leading science leader
Yep.
to continue doing this, crazy pants unethical stuff because we're not watching.
Because to criticize him would be to attack science.
Yeah. Or to attack us who put him into this position of power in the first place.
Yeah, right. And he's producing results.
Not far from me, again, over on the east side of Central Park, there is a monument that was recently taken down in the last few years. The father of modern gynecology was this Southern doctor who did countless surgeries without anesthesia on African American slave women.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes the same surgery repeatedly, and that's the father of American gynecology. And again, it is only in the last decade that this after he practiced enough on African American enslaved women, he came north and sort of developed, here's how you deal with fistulas, etc.
Wow.
And I don't know offhand how much of the science that we got out of the concentration camps actually ended up getting used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, I've got, or for that matter, I mean, we've only relatively recently stopped calling it Asperger's syndrome after the guy in, the Nazi who, identified autism, and So.
Well, that's how what your U.S.
Well, if you look at
minimum requirements for vitamins is because we did questionable science.
Right.
If you look at a lot of the non-NASA type of stuff that came over with Operation Paperclip, a lot of it is the physiology
mm-hmm.
and the nutrition,
simply
because back during mid-war, they wanted to work out how long somebody could survive crash landed in the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. So I came across this at university because I was doing a lot of stuff, being an internal environmental engineer, on human comfort. And all of the really old stuff is right at the back, way out on the boundary of the uncomfort. And I'm working on this bit, but I've got to read that bit to get through the notes. And similar sorts of things being done in Japanese camps.
Yeah.
And it always, that was so much further back that we collectively didn't really know about Operation Paperclip in the same way as we do now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was always, well, okay, what happens in the middle and what happens since?
Well,
and how has it moved on?
Yeah.
And now all this similar stuff plus the woman with the cancer cells has popped up. What is the other bit that's missing that we probably do know, but we haven't joined the dots up in quite the properly connected way to put that story together. And things like where I grew up, just up the road, was what was then called the Royal Small Arms Factory, which is where the Lee Enfield and almost all of the British arms that has EN, so Sten gun, the Bren gun, the Aden gun, etc., all came from that research and factory. And there's a huge wall, 60, 70 foot high and several feet thick. And that's where they used to do the target range. And they were the biggest local employer in a single place. So they used to do a Christmas party for the kids of the families who worked there. But you could never get out of the canteen. And it was so just up the road from there was a Napoleonic level black powder storage place that was in the middle of nowhere, because where else would you store black powder? But was in easy reach of London. So that's in and around Waltham Cross and Waltham Abbey. And one of the things that I know that came through there was what happens when you drop a grenade into a tank. And they did that research mostly with pigs hanging where the people were, but not always. And you then start to say, well, okay, we know about our push to go supersonic, that then brings you back towards NASA. Where's the extra bit of physiology? Forget the Chuck Yeager, let's reverse the control surfaces to make it work as an engineering problem. Where's the medical problem? Deep sea diving, same sort of problem, except that's been going on for longer. And you see lots of similar bits and pieces coming up in normal pharmaceutical research where things, how did you make that link? What's the next step? Why are we not making that step now? Etc. etc.
Well, are you saying that there's
the other thing that I was partly trying to interrupt on when we were talking about MacArthur and being dealt with as a end of war, post World War II problem, you had exactly the same issue almost with a firebrand hero in terms of I forgot what his name is now. The guy that died before he was allowed back to the US, Patton, General Patton. They kept on keeping him in Germany, wouldn't let him come back. And then he had a car accident. Everybody else walked away without a scratch. but he's sitting in the back of a staff car and broke his neck.
Mm.
And then died a week later or something in the hospital. And he was always pushing for his various solutions, which may or may not have worked out. But in a number of instances, for instance, at the Battle of the Bulge and the final then crossing of the Rhine, he never asked permission. He just pre-planned it and then either did it or was asked to do something. But you've got a couple of weeks to do it. No, we'll be there in 48 hours. Plan's already there, out in the field, just got to tick the box to say go. So that's how he managed to end up relieving Bastogne so quickly, because he'd seen it coming, planned for it. The plans were all out in the field, not just at headquarters, but just don't do this until I say yeah. So what would have happened? So Truman was worried about big war heroes coming back, and of course, the next president, Eisenhower, was a big war hero.
Oh, yeah.
Just wasn't Pat. So where's the lack of upfront conspiracy type worry about that solution?
No.
Would Patton have beaten Eisenhower? Possibly.
I think
we would have had a whole different Cold War because of that.
I think we would have a different
Because Patton's big thing was, we're so far into Germany, why have we stopped?
Yeah.
Let's go all the way to Moscow.
Yeah.
So if there was a third, fourth, and fifth bomb sitting around, or at least imminent, what do? Do you take Stalin out by taking Moscow out? Or do you make sure that you do it on a trip to Leningrad or Stalingrad, because that has better press than taking out Moscow? In the same way as we didn't take out Osaka, and we didn't take out much of Rome or Paris. So,
well, we didn't need to. I mean, why?
The kickback on Operation Paperclip, along with the US, the UK, and the Soviet equivalents,
Mm-hmm.
where's all that progress disappeared to? Have we used it all up, or are we still using stuff? We're still flying.
Yeah, I think the
aircraft got a lot better.
Yeah,
very fast, etc., etc., etc.
Right. And clearly with
computers without too many bugs in them.
You keep coming back to Operation Paperclip. But clearly there's something, there's going on behind the scenes while the war is kind of wending its way to its
back to the Roman Empire bit. I quite agree with the comment that I saw earlier about the fact that we only seem to do by US and Rome, or UK Empire and Rome. We don't seem to talk much about the others, whereas things like the Dutch and the French would be good entertainment in many respects. If you find a few Indonesians, ask them about the Dutch stuff, they'll come back and say those nice pot smoking people from Amsterdam are real bastards, really.
Yeah.
So, and that's before you worry about Conrad and the King of Belgium and Congo.
Yeah.
So, for the other knock-on thing similar that hasn't come up yet, I think, is things like midway through the war, there's the West Bengal famine as a empire decision taken from afar that has a huge local impact. And yet Churchill, other than he got kicked out just before the final bell for the various theatre wars closed.
Well, there's also a lot going on behind the
Didn't really
scenes.
suffer any consequences for it. Now, he stayed an MP for another good few years, became Prime Minister again later.
Yeah.
After the Labour government fell. So there's a lot to be said for what's the consequences, I think, much of which is not covered in this book.
Oh, well, that's never, a lot of it's never covered. I mean, and how could there be consequences for somebody like Winston Churchill? But I think that, you keep, I mean, going back to what you were saying earlier about the science and everything, Tim, I think that you were sort of assuming that there was going to be knowledge. I mean, that the knowledge that we have looking back at it about this, about this discontinuity, right? That like when you get to the, to the sound barrier, or when you get to these, these points. I mean, looking at it from the other side, for a lot of people, it's just more of the same. It's just pushing, it's pushing more on the same pedal. Right. And so it's not as clear before it happens that there's going to be a discontinuity. The other thing, of course, and to go back to India, the other thing that nobody ever talks about is that by the end of the Second World War, Great Britain was deeply in debt to India. India basically financed Britain's participation in the Second World War. So, there's really no,
well, the big banks for Canada, Australia, India all got emptied and shipped over to Canada and then by train into the UN. So you've only got Fort Knox to hold our money.
Can we have if there's actually anything in Fort Knox?
We all know from our West Wing history, take your drink now, that it's UFOs that are hiding in there.
Fort Knox is empty. Although there is that vault on the bedrock of Manhattan.
No, we even sent James Bond to go and have a look. We know our gold is there, so send it back.
All right. Yeah. So where does that leave? I mean, so we get to the end of this set of chapters, right? And the war is ending, and then we're getting to the next chapter is the Kilroy was here chapter, sort of the ubiquitous America, and this would be and this would have been the period when, my father was in Berlin, right, repairing radios and going from sector to sector in his 2-ton truck. And so that's a different kind of imperial moment. It'll be interesting to see how Immerwahr, deals with that, because that's not the type of empire that he's talking about hiding. But I think that's the one that is even, I mean, ultimately easier to hide, right? The financial, the Aspen and Davos empire.
Well, I like that he uses the word pointillist empire as a, and it would seem that, China is starting to try and play some of that world game of picking up, soft power in other areas, especially places like Africa right now. But it bears mentioning, because I'm sure the book's editor or someone was watching the ball very carefully, and they managed to put the chapter "There Are Times When Men Have to Die" starts on page 187, which, if you know the police slang for
Oh, really?
187,
Really?
yeah, like somebody was like sitting in their office thinking like nobody's going to notice
You're gonna
this,
make
but
this work. Wow. That's
you
some
know,
Illuminati stuff there right there.
maybe it was coincidence. I mean, there's so much death in this that,
Yeah,
you could have done it almost anywhere.
yeah.
But that particular title name appearing on that particular page is just, you
Interesting.
know, solid book editing from start to finish.
Wow. Okay.
Speaking of the death, though, we didn't get to we haven't even talked about the roughly 1 million Filipinos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did I not know? I did not know that roughly 1 million, and we killed a ton of them. Particularly in the complete destruction of Manila.
Well,
Which,
let God
which
sort
I
it
was
out.
surprised. Sorry.
Let God sort it out.
Yeah.
Well, I was a little surprised that he didn't retcon in order to save, the village. We had to destroy it. He didn't pull that phrase in, which
Yeah.
I maybe our good editor pulled that out as part of their process. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you also notice the big section breaks within chapters are separated by a good old American star.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just
I
a
love
single star, not multiple.
Yep. Just one.
I did love the very last sentence or whatever in the, or not necessarily sentence, but sort of anecdote where I didn't even know we had people here.
I was invading a foreign country. Yeah.
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 It's
Yeah. Well, and that's yeah, and some of those photographs really
Yeah.
are
We've been we killed many more. We killed 100 times more Filipinos in Manila than we killed Japanese.
mhm,
You
yeah.
know.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, acceptable collateral damage. I mean, it's an early yeah, I mean, the Second World War brings us a lot of these kind of, over the top kind of total war concepts that we, that we then sort of institutionalize. Well, and the laundry list of the people, even including, Pappy Bush, who were there and where they were was interesting.
Well, in that when you compare and contrast that to, a current administration that still doesn't want to admit that the Civil War had anything to do with slavery. It's like, we're still trying to prop up these like mythologies so that we can control the people
Yeah.
and keep everybody, you know, keep everybody on this old page
Right. Right.
so that we can maintain this power structure.
Well, and yeah, and I mean, and that since that brings us to propaganda, right? And to the who benefits, keep cui bono from from that from that whole discourse about the Civil War and slavery. And that brings us back to the Epstein files and Noam Chomsky, which was an interesting
I almost,
moment to sort of add to the whole to the whole Chomsky beclowning himself during COVID thing.
yeah. Well, I almost, some historians doing it for us probably, and I just don't know who or where, but like, I feel like every tranche of stuff that comes out, there's like a new level of like, or a new number of cancellations that are happening of like, you know,
Hmm. Oh yeah, Peter Attia. Yeah.
and it's,
Yep.
another British lord this week, essentially stepped aside.
Right. Left the government. Yeah.
But seemingly they seem to just be stepping
for the whole
aside so we're
job.
out of public eye and we can retire with all our riches rather than be prosecuted and spend the end of our life in jail. kind of business.
Right.
Which
I did hear that. Sorry, Andy Mountbatten Windsor. His new house is sure it's luxurious, but his servants aren't nice enough to him, and it's sort of muddy around there.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Well, that's
watch out for the hookworms.
life is tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who will clean his boots?
Don't be running around in your feces barefoot. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I took a quick look, by the way.
Goes back. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Will.
I took a very quick look in Google about hookworms in the U.S., and apparently they mostly became endemic during and after the U.S. Civil War, due to sort of collapse of things. So, anyway.
It's a weird thing, and I don't know if it'll be in the next chunk. I don't know how far are we going to go for next week?
Oh, we should decide. We're getting to probably. And how far does the next section go? Let me look. Rather than flip through the pages.
It's been a fast read. I think my nickel is. This has been a fast read. I think my nickel is just do the rest of the thing.
Finish it.
Yeah. I mean, the page count is really long, but that's because there's like 200 pages of notes and index. Yeah.
Well, it's about 180 pages to the end. I guess we could do it. It'll be interesting because Mr. Bond is in there in chapter 20.
Well, while we munch on that for a minute, your statement about we have to destroy the thing to save the thing. I had skimmed through the language as a virus because I'm super curious about how empires use language or not, and stamp out languages like, before Britain went anywhere else, they stamped out Welsh, they stamped out Cornish, they stamped out Manx and Irish, as a precursor to everything else. But there was a quote under a picture on page 333, conquer English to make China stronger, as a Chinese method of like, we'll take on another language so that we can be better versus, being conquered by English, which makes us culturally less as a thing.
I'm curious how he weaves, if he tries to weave burrows in there as well.
Yeah.
Since that's his catchphrase.
Well, and that actually, at the end of that, I hadn't looked at that page before, but at the final paragraph before the little star, if the Chinese rule the world someday, says linguist John McWhorter, I suspect they will do it in English.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, all right.
Which is super interesting if you know John McWhorter and his background. Like that's like a stark phrase, because he's, he is the bastion and like the peak of kind of American linguists at the moment, and has, he's right. But he's also writing popular press books now every couple of years.
Dictionary history or something, hasn't he done?
Yeah, but he's also an African American man who, speaks very eloquently about, weird things like Ebonics that, I think he's maybe been sidelined a little, and under the current administration, he's not probably as vocal as he was being 2 or 3 years ago.
We're talking about the New York Times columnist?
Yeah. Oh, amongst many other things. That guy where he wears like 15 hats. But he's one of the few linguists I'm aware of, other than, people who have podcasts like, on grammar, that like anybody knows in mainstream America. So, but he's really got some great, I've read a bunch of his stuff.
Okay. I wasn't familiar with him.
I love his opinion columns in the Times.
Okay. Well, then we'll finish it for next week. Which means then we have to start talking about what's next.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we do plow through it, the what's next becomes a more imminent question.
Yep. and I don't have anything top of mind really.
I was looking at the book suggestions. White Poverty got a ton of votes. It's down there a bit, but
Oh, well, we do have a bunch of sections. There is like a newer suggestions we haven't moved around in a bit. And then there's the stuff, you know, a chunk further down that probably has been around for a while and well voted on.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me scroll down to there. Gaia Speaks. Did you put that in, Tim? Why Empires Fall. Yeah.
Probably. I can't tell at the moment.
Or by other means. Also, who we are and how we got here. Yeah, that would be a change of pace. Only the Rich Can Play got a lot of votes. I'm hesitant now. I'm kind of scared to go to Harari now that we've just been with Pinker.
Yeah, has anybody put out a book this week on note taking? Like, you know, need a
Yeah.
palate cleanser.
Is there? Yeah, is there?
I mean, there is the Miller History of the Book, which looks quite popular press, but looks also interesting. Joel Miller, I think it is. I don't think I didn't put in the list.
The other thing, of course,
done
is
much
David
reviews.
Weiss's book is there.
What was that, Tim?
Mentioned on and off.
What's that?
And Who Are We and How We Got Here.
Yeah.
I've now finished that. So we shouldn't be doing that again too quickly.
White Poverty looks like it got some votes from people who aren't currently, who might come back for it. Pat.
Yeah, I miss Pat.
Yeah. Yeah, as a brooding presence. He didn't always say that.
I could never get that guy to shut up.
He would, but his presence was spoke volumes.
Well, the other way of choosing the next one is to give Pat the choice.
Oh yeah. Or maybe I'll
which choice will bring you back?
Yeah. Maybe I'll email him and ask him that.
Yeah.
As long as it's not
the other thing I was thinking, with the last few books have all been relatively new.
Yeah.
And there is that book on Robert Moses.
Oh yeah.
By Robert Caro.
Yeah.
Which is an
that's
old
like a 4-month project.
Yeah.
That would take a
But they've
couple of
now
months.
released an e-copy.
Right. But it's also like 1,000 pages.
Oh
Jim.
God.
The problem is, how long would it take?
Yeah.
I read that book 10 years ago, and it took me, and I'm a fast reader, it took me 2 months. It's a great book, but it's a long one and dense.
Ooh. The Infinite Alphabet, The Laws of Knowledge. That sounds kind of promising. Oh wow, yeah, that's
almost
thick.
as big as my head.
That's thick.
And this last year, I think, was the 50th anniversary. So at long last, they finally digitized it and made an ebook. You couldn't get an ebook version of this until this year.
When I read War and Peace in my younger days, it only took me a month and a half.
Well, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius is short.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Oddly enough,
back to the great books.
The one that Chris has just put up.
Yeah, I kind of like
Infinite Alphabet.
I kind of like the sound of that one.
Marcus Aurelius.
I was one of these other books yesterday. So I'd be happy to go with that, I suppose. Although
it might be
very new again.
It might be kind of fun to bounce back. To bounce back to a knowledge, a learning knowledge, kind of a thing.
Oh, and for background, Cesar Hidalgo is a physicist turned information theorist. He was at MIT for nearly a decade. I think he's now in France.
Hmm.
But his last, I don't know if he's probably had a couple of small, like more academic-y books in between. But his last big popular press book was
big on economics.
Why Information Grows.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh yeah, I think you've cited that before, Chris.
Which it's in my area of like, I follow information theory stuff pretty closely, but this is
the
kind of a
Indiana
broader book.
Jones. He's described as the Indiana Jones of the knowledge economy.
Well, his big area for most of the last decade is like complexity economics and economics in general, and kind of how the world works through viewing economics as an information theory lens type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, he's been a pretty good writer for all the stuff I've read. So
256 pages, so it won't take us months. All right, I vote for that. So we just
Hopefully just got released.
just got released, so we're super current.
yeah, I wasn't watching very closely, and I meant to put it on put it on our voting list like a month or two back before it came out. But
Oh my God, it came out yesterday.
yes, yeah, I've been
bleeding
waiting
edge.
I've been waiting for a year and a half. I've known he's been writing this book, and it was set for publication. And I think it came out in Britain probably a couple months back, but it's finally now out in the US.
All right.
Although you'll notice it's Alan Lane, which is a UK publisher.
Oh, okay.
Who typically does rights deals with a US publisher to put stuff out, but in this case, I think they're doing it on their own. So
okay. I think we've decided.
I mean,
Yeah, it works. That works for me. Yeah, and so I'll. All right. Then that's a done deal then. And he's
also assuming we actually manage to get through it all next week.
we will push through it all. We didn't really spend that much. I mean, we spent half of our time not talking about the book. So if we have to talk about the book the whole time next week,
and we focused on the Philippines.
Yes,
which
I mean he
was rich.
He kept bouncing back to the Philippines too.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing our technique.
Wait, where are these pins again?
You've had your fill of them?
Yeah. And language is a virus.
Some sort of Spanish island or something?
Yeah.
Well, it's the in probably a decade they'll be known as the Trumpapines.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're suggesting we'll take them back?
Take them back.
Oh yeah, totally, because there's precedents. They were ours before, so
just like Greenland.
Oh.
Or Iceland, or whatever.
I'll see you.
One of those
right.
lands.
Oh, they're all icy. Yeah. Have a good week.
See y'all.
See you later.